Among the wonderful things that come with my fascination with ghosts and ghost stories is when I'm contacted by people with their own tale to tell. These people help take the ghost stories out the pages of history and books and bring them into the real world. Unlike written accounts, personal stories allow for interaction. They give me the chance to ask questions, to look for the small details that make a tale truly vivid. Hearing these modern experiences directly from those who have lived or are living them makes the stories from the past feel tangible, turning folklore into something immediate and real. It's in these moments, through conversation and shared experience, that historical accounts take on a new dimension, complementing the stories preserved in books by adding the immediacy and emotion of first-hand experience. Over the past couple of years, I've heard some fascinating accounts from people all across the world. Some no more than fleeting glimpses or unexplained sounds, while others are truly chilling, like Anna's experiences during a brief stay in Parliament Square, Edinburgh, which I featured in my Halloween episode, The Haunting of Parliament Square, Edinburgh's Darkest Secret. And these stories continue to come in. Recently, I was contacted by a lady who, due to her role in public service, has asked to remain anonymous. So, for the sake of this account, we'll call her Hannah. Hannah contacted me to share her experiences as a 20-year-old in one of England's most historic cities, Durham. Hannah, originally from Newcastle, moved to Durham to complete her studies at university, and to help her cover her fees, she took on jobs that are staple for many young people today, finding work in some of the city's many historic pubs and hotels. If you're unfamiliar with Durham, it's a city steeped in history and legend, found in the northeast of England. Perhaps most famous for its majestic Norman cathedral and imposing castle, Durham has played a crucial role in England's religious, military and political history. Its past is intertwined with events that shaped the nation, from the Viking invasions to the Norman conquest, and from the Scottish Wars of Independence to the Industrial Revolution. What's perhaps less well known is that Durham has historical links to Scotland, including connections to Edinburgh, which extend beyond geographical proximity and into the shared struggles and exchanges between the two regions. Before Durham became the city we know today, the area was inhabited by various Celtic and Anglo-Saxon groups. The region was part of the Kingdom of Northumbria, a powerful Anglo-Saxon realm that stretched from the Humber in the south to the Firth of Forth in the north. This meant that what's now Edinburgh fell within the same cultural and political sphere as Durham in the early medieval period. Durham's recorded history begins in 995 AD, when monks from Lindisfarne, fleeing Viking raids, brought the relics of St Cuthbert to the site where the city now stands. According to legend, the monks were led to the location by divine intervention, as the saint's coffin suddenly became too heavy to move, a sign that his final resting place had been chosen. This moment marked Durham as a spiritual centre, a status it's maintained ever since. Durham played a major role during the Scottish Wars of Independence from 1296 to 1357, particularly as a military bulwark for England. As tensions between England and Scotland escalated following Edward Longshank's attempts to assert dominance over Scotland, Durham became a key defensive position against Scottish raids and incursions. One of the most notable events involving Durham was the Battle of Neville's Cross on October 17th, 1346. Following the English victory at the Battle of Crécy in France, King Philip VI of France urged his ally, David II of Scotland, to invade northern England as a distraction. The Scots obliged and responded by crossing the border and advancing into England, raiding towns and villages as they went. Durham itself became the focal point of English resistance when the Scottish army, numbering around 12,000 men, advanced towards the city. The English, under the command of Ralph Neville, Henry Percy, and Archbishop William Zouche of York, engaged the Scottish forces just outside Durham at Neville's Cross. The English forces, numbering only around 7,000, held the high ground and used superior positioning to counter the Scottish assault. The battle was fiercely contested. The Scots, despite their numerical advantage, struggled against the English longbowmen, who rained arrows down on them before they could properly engage in combat. As the battle raged, disorder broke out amongst the Scottish ranks. The English forces pushed forward, and in the confusion, several key Scottish leaders were killed or captured. King David himself was wounded in the face by an arrow before being taken prisoner by the English. It's said he was captured after his reflection was noticed in the water after he attempted to hide under a bridge. He was transported to London and imprisoned in the Tower of London for 11 years before a ransom was paid for his release. The impact of the battle was felt far beyond Durham. With David imprisoned, Scotland faced political instability, and English dominance in the north was further cemented. Durham also functioned as a key base for English military operations during the wars, housing garrisons and acting as a supply hub for campaigns against Scotland. The city's fortifications, including Durham Castle, were strengthened to deter further Scottish incursions, and it remained a critical bulwark against northern threats throughout the conflicts. After the Battle of Dunbar in 1650, during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, thousands of Scottish prisoners were marched to Durham and imprisoned in Durham Cathedral. The conditions, as you can imagine, were dire, and many perished due to starvation, disease, and the harsh winter. Mass graves containing the remains were discovered in Durham centuries later, serving as a stark reminder of the city's involvement in conflicts between England and Scotland. Following the end of the Wars of Independence and the eventual unification of England and Scotland under James VI in 1603, Durham's military role began to decline. However, the scars of war remained. The city retained its identity as a stronghold against Scottish aggression, and its connection to the broader Anglo-Scottish conflict persisted in local memory and historical records. Today, while national identities remain distinct, the historical links between Durham and Edinburgh remind us of a shared past that shaped both cities in profound ways. Yet history is more than battles and shifting borders. It remains in the stones of the buildings, in whispered stories passed down through generations, and sometimes in things unseen. The weight of the past can be felt in the city streets, and in certain places, never truly fades. One such place is the City Hotel, where Hannah first worked. Located on the historic street of New Elvet, the hotel, with foundations dating back to the 1500s, has served many purposes over the centuries. A coaching inn for weary travellers, a lively pub, and a guest house with rooms above. Rising 4 stories high, the building's ground floor welcomes patrons to the public house, while the second floor offers lodgings for visitors. The uppermost 2 stories, once used as living quarters for former management, now sit largely untouched, their empty rooms holding echoes of the past. Originally built as a coaching inn during the Tudor period, the City Hotel provided a rest stop for merchants and travellers passing through Durham. By the 18th century, it had developed a reputation as a well-frequented lodging house, accommodating visiting academics and traders. Records suggest that during the early 19th century, the hotel housed soldiers passing through Durham, with the upper floors repurposed as temporary barracks. Later the building was converted into a pub, a role it's maintained into the modern day. But for those who've worked here, history isn't just something written in books. It's alive in the shadows, in the unexplained creaks of the floorboards, in the way the air feels heavier in certain rooms. And for Hannah, this was where her encounters began. Struggling to make ends meet, Hannah found herself working multiple jobs in Durham, and the City Hotel was the first place to employ her. She was just 20, and after only a week of working as bar staff, the owner abruptly left, leaving Hannah and her friend Peter to take over the running of the establishment, while the brewery searched for new management. It was an opportunity most young people could only dream of: free accommodation, a place of authority, and a taste of independence. Yet, as quickly as they learned, the City Hotel had a dark atmosphere. On their first day as stand-in management, curiosity got the better of them. Exploring the upper floors, they found themselves on the very top level, a space left long undisturbed. The air was thick, the scent of old wood and damp stone pressing in on them. It was then that they noticed a dark, aged stain smeared across the wooden floor. Then they found the toolbox, forgotten, rusting, its lid askew. Inside, a hammer lay, its handle marked with a dark, sticky substance. A slow, creeping unease filled their chests, and without a word, they turned and left the room, choosing not to investigate further. Assuming, or hoping, the substance was just oil or something similar. But the sight of the dark, unexplained stain stayed with them. Later, Peter had to leave. The rules were clear. One of them had to stay overnight, ensuring the pub remained watched over. With no other choice, Hannah braced herself to spend the night alone. She chose the smallest guest room on the second floor, believing that its compact size would offer some sense of security. Locking the door behind her, she settled in, the pub beneath her lying still and empty. Sleep, however, would not come easy. It began with the sounds, muted footsteps pacing above, slow and deliberate. She held her breath, willing the noises to be a trick of her imagination. But they continued, steady and unrelenting. Then, among the noise of the footsteps, came the unmistakable sound of furniture shifting, heavy scraping against the floorboards of the upper level. No one was meant to be there. It was supposed to be empty. Fear settled into her bones. She forced herself to remain still, hoping the sounds would stop. Then came a moment that stopped her heart and sent chills down her spine. The door handle to her locked room twisted. This wasn't a mistake or a trick of the light. Someone, something, was trying to get in. She lay frozen in her bed, her eyes wide open and fixed on the door, her heart pounding, so loudly she feared it may betray her presence. The handle rattled again, more insistent this time, and then, just as suddenly, silence fell. Long moments passed before she found the courage to move, every muscle in her body rigid with tension. She listened, straining for any sound, but there was nothing beyond the sound of her own ragged breathing. The morning light was a blessed relief, but she didn't remain in the room. She refused to go back upstairs alone after that night. But long after she left, she wondered who or what had tried to open her door that night. A few weeks later, Hannah and Peter befriended a man named David, the manager of another local pub. One night after work, they went for a few drinks together, and the conversation turned to the City Hotel. It turned out David had worked there several years earlier. With a bit of Dutch courage, Hannah asked if he knew anything about the stain and the hammer. Instantly, Peter's demeanour changed. His previously friendly expression darkened, and without a word, he set down his drink and walked out the bar. They would never see him again. The impression Hannah was left with was clear. David had seen something on the third floor. Something that had also deeply troubled him. Activity in the City Hotel continued and extended beyond the bedroom Hannah had her first experiences in. She'd never forget the night she became certain that the City Hotel was haunted. It was a normal shift. She'd finished cleaning the bar, locked up as usual, and made her way upstairs to bed. The building had settled into the kind of silence that only comes in the dead of night. But then, as she drifted off, she heard it. The front door opening. At first she thought she'd imagined it, but then came the unmistakable clatter of bottles, the low thud of heavy footsteps, and the scrape of something against the bar. Someone was downstairs. A cold dread settled over her. Every instinct told her to check, to confirm what was happening, but fear held her in place. Instead, she listened, heart pounding, as the sounds continued below. A bang, a shuffle, the dull clinking of glass. It carried on for what felt like an eternity, but she didn't move. She didn't dare. Hannah lay there frozen until the first light of dawn crept through her window. Only then, when she was certain the intruder had gone, did she summon the courage to go downstairs. She expected to find signs of a break-in, a shattered window, bottles missing, the till forced open. But everything was exactly as she'd left it. The doors were still locked, the bar was untouched, the bottles, the glasses, the furniture, all undisturbed. Except for one thing. A single pool ball lay on the floor, positioned in the centre of the room. It was then she knew. The City Hotel wasn't just old, it was haunted. And that was just the beginning. Every morning after that, the pool balls would be moved. Sometimes they were scattered across the table, other times stacked in odd formations. No matter how many times she put them back, by morning they'd shifted again. And it wasn't just objects moving on their own. Whenever she cleaned the guest rooms, she would hear it. The voice of a child singing. Soft, distant, just at the edge of hearing. She would pause, straining to make out the words, trying to tell where the sound was coming from. But the moment she moved towards it, the sound would stop. She wasn't the only one who experienced strange occurrences. Guests would be playing the bandit machine, when they'd suddenly scream, swearing they'd seen the reflection of an old man scowling at them. But when they turned round, there was no one there. And then there were the beds. Hannah would be making them up, smoothing out the sheets, adjusting the pillows, turning to leave, only for a pillow to be thrown at her back. Not to slip, not to fall, thrown. One night, Hannah wasn't working, but she'd gone in anyway to sit with her friend Helen, who was on shift alone. The pub was always quiet, with only a few regulars. Hours could pass without anyone coming in. Given its location, just down from the city prison, the City Hotel had its share of colourful guests. People just released from jail would sometimes stop in for a cheap bed and a drink. For safety, whenever someone was working alone, a friend would sit in as a customer. That night, Hannah stood at the bar, chatting with Helen, when she noticed her friend suddenly stop mid-sentence. Helen's eyes flicked over Hannah's shoulder, toward the glass door behind her, as though a customer was about to walk in. But then her expression changed. "There's a little boy looking at us," she said. At first, she had thought, where's this kid's parent? But then, after a few seconds, she had a better, clearer look at him. His deep, sunken eyes, his malnourished frame, the way his clothes, a flat cap, waistcoat and scruffy trousers, looked like something from another time. He couldn't have been older than 7 or 8. As she took in the details, a chill ran through her. There was something off about him. His stillness, the way he just stood there, watching. And then, just as suddenly as she'd noticed him, he was gone. No movement, no turning away, no fading into the distance. Just there one moment, and gone the next. Helen saw him several times after that. Months later, a group of customers came in, and among them was a psychic. Without prompting, she told them the city hotel had several spirits attached to the building. A little boy who played with the pool balls, an old man whose reflection could be seen in the bandit machine, and a landlady who'd been pushed down the stairs to the basement. Shortly after, the basement was sealed off, along with the stairs leading down to it. And yet, despite the fear the place instilled in her, despite the unease, the strange occurrences, the heavy feeling of being watched, Hannah never wanted to leave. Even now, long after she's gone, the city hotel stayed with her. She thought about it, dreamt about it, and in some strange way missed it. Durham streets have long been home to more than just a living. Its pubs, tucked between ancient buildings, carry the weight of the city's past, and with that past comes stories, some fondly remembered, others best left undisturbed. Among these establishments, the city was the one that had always felt strangely welcoming to Hannah. She worked there for years. But when a new manager took over, she stepped back to part-time bar work, picking up shifts at the Big Jug, another historic bar, and at Oddbins, the wine shop that once stood opposite. It was here that she was first introduced to something otherworldly. During her interview for Oddbins, she was told about a ghost in the cellar, the one where the wine was stored. The spirit was said to be that of a woman who had been hanged centuries ago, when the gallows still stood on that very ground. The story was shared casually, as if it was just another part of the job. According to the staff, she didn't take kindly to being ignored. If someone entered the cellar without acknowledging her, bottles would sometimes be found shattered on the stone floor, a warning of her displeasure. Hannah, however, never had any trouble. She would make a habit of greeting the spirit whenever she descended into the cellar, talking to her as she worked. In return, she never felt any hostility, only a quiet presence lingering in the dim, cool space beneath the shop. But while Oddbins had a ghost who seemed content with acknowledgement, the Big Jug carried a far heavier atmosphere. If the city had made Hannah feel at home, the Big Jug did the opposite. There was something about the place that made the air feel thick, unwelcoming, as if an unseen presence resented those who stayed too long. The strangest part of the pub was the upstairs function room, or rather, the door that led to it. The door was always locked, refusing to open no matter how much force was applied. A chair was placed in front of the door, and although staff made a point of moving it away, it always reappeared in the same spot. It was as though something unseen was insisting that the door remain shut, Stephen, another member of staff who worked shifts there, had an experience that only deepened the sense of unease. One afternoon, while he was working alone, 2 women entered the pub. There was something unusual about them, something in the way they looked around, as if sensing something others couldn't. They approached the bar and introduced themselves as witches. "We noticed the energy in this place," one of them said, her gaze lingering on the staircase that led to the locked door. "It's not right." They spoke about the function room, about the chair that refused to stay moved, about the oppressive air that clung to the building. And then, as suddenly as they had arrived, they left, offering no explanation, no parting words, just a quiet, knowing glance before stepping out into the street. The Big Jug was not the kind of place where someone wanted to hang around after hours. Even when the pub was busy, an uneasy silence seemed to seep in between conversations. It was not like the cellar at Oddbins, where a spirit simply wanted to be acknowledged. Whatever resided at the Big Jug didn't want to be known, just obeyed. Firstly, I'd like to thank Hannah for reaching out and sharing her experiences with me. It's not always easy to revisit such events, and I appreciate her trust in allowing me to tell her story. For all the talk of haunted houses, ghostly roads, and cursed landscapes, there is another kind of haunting, one that doesn't always make it into folklore collections or ghost hunting TV shows. Some people are haunted not by one place, but by many. They move from building to building, street to street, yet the same presence follows, or the same kind of things keep happening. Hannah's story is one of these. She wasn't someone who sought out the paranormal, yet she encountered it again and again. Whether it was the wine cellar ghost at Oddbins, who expected to be acknowledged before she let you go about your work, or the oppressive presence at the Big Jug, it seemed that wherever Hannah went, something unseen was waiting. Some would say she was simply in the wrong places at the wrong times, working in old pubs with long histories. But perhaps it was something else. Some people are, knowingly or not, more open to the other side. There's an old idea that certain people act like beacons for spirits, drawing them in. Maybe it's something about their energy, their sensitivity, or an unconscious ability to notice what others ignore. And maybe it wasn't the places that are haunted, but the people who pass through them. Hannah's experience also raises another, often overlooked consideration. When we talk about haunted locations, it's usually the building we focus on. The history, the tragedy, the strange goings-on recorded over the years. But what about the people who spend their nights working in them? The bar staff, the cleaners, the night porters, the security guards, the ones who lock up after the last customer has left, who walk through the empty halls, switch off the lights, and are left alone in the silence. They are the ones who hear the footsteps on an empty floor above, who catch glimpses of something moving in the shadows, who find the chair they just moved has returned to its usual spot, who listen to the quiet shift of atmosphere in an empty room and know, without needing to be told, that they're not alone. So the next time you step into an old pub, take a moment to think about the people behind the bar. The ones who'll still be there long after you've gone, clearing up in the dim light, counting down the minutes until they can leave. They might never tell you what they've seen, but it doesn't mean nothing's there. So spare a thought for the staff, tip them well, treat them kindly, because when the doors shut for the night, when the glasses are dry, the till is counted, and the last light is switched off, some of them won't be alone.